see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sex.
Throughout today's French MotoGP practice session, many eyes began to notice a different detail on TOPRAK's bike. The front end of the bike appeared more upright than before, the rear wheel was moved back forward, and the swing arm angle was no longer as flat as Yamaha's initial setup a few weeks ago. This small change immediately had a significant impact on the bike's character on the MANS track. TOPRAK looked much more comfortable entering technical sections. The bike began to change direction more quickly, and no longer seemed so heavy entering slow corners. Even over several long laps, the Turkish rider began to control the front end of the bike much more aggressively without losing stability under hard braking. This change immediately became a topic of conversation in the paddock, as Yamaha had been considered too focused on pursuing big solutions with its V4 engine project and new aerodynamic package. However, at Le Mans, the solution that began to help TOPRAK came from a change in the bike's basic geometry that seemed simple but crucial to his riding style. Since joining Yamaha's MotoGP project, TOPRAK has consistently struggled to find a natural feeling on the bike. He seemed unable to maximize his signature late braking style several times because the front of the bike was too difficult to read when entering corners. Furthermore, the bike's excessively long nature also made left-to-right transitions feel slow, forcing TOPRAK to drastically alter his riding style. Today, the situation began to change. The most noticeable effect came from the change in swing arm angle. Yamaha finally abandoned the overly flat swing arm setup that previously provided secure rear traction, but lacked aggressive response when exiting corners. With the new, slightly higher angle, TOPRAK began to gain mechanical grip that better suited his riding style. The Yamaha bike now seemed more lively in TOPRAK's hands. He began to open the throttle more readily when exiting slow corners, and was no longer making frequent mid-corner corrections. Some paddock observers even described this as one of the most positive sessions TOPRAK had experienced since he first rode a Yamaha MotoGP bike. Although his lap times weren't completely dominant, TOPRAK's racing rhythm appeared much more consistent than in previous sessions. And that was a very important signal for Yamaha. Because so far, the biggest issue hasn't been just single lap speed, but how to make TOPRAK truly confident in the bike's characteristics over the full race distance. And here's the full news. The atmosphere in the 2026 French MotoGP paddock felt different today, as attention slowly began to turn to the Yamaha garage. Amidst all the intense attention on the development of the latest V4 engine, the new aerodynamic package, and the immense pressure that continues to haunt Yamaha's performance this season, it was the simplest of changes that finally began to have a real impact for TOPRAK Razgatlioglu at the Le Mans circuit. Throughout today's practice session, TOPRAK's Yamaha bike was seen using a slightly different configuration than in previous tests. Many paddock observers immediately noticed the changes in the bike's geometry. The front end was made more upright, the rear wheel was moved back in, and the swing arm angle was no longer as flat as Yamaha's old setup. On paper, these changes may seem small. But in modern MotoGP, details as small as a few millimeters can drastically change a bike's character. And that's what seemed to be happening to TOPRAK today. Since the beginning of the MotoGP project with Yamaha, one major problem has consistently emerged. TOPRAK hasn't truly found a natural connection with the bike. He has repeatedly struggled to produce the aggressive style that has become his trademark in World SBK. The Yamaha was too difficult to turn when entering slow corners, too long during left-to-right transitions, and the front end didn't provide enough feel when he tried to brake hard. For a regular rider, that might be tolerable. But for TOPRAK, front-end feel was everything. For years in World SBK, TOPRAK was known as a rider with some of the most extreme braking skills in motorcycle racing. He could enter corners much later than his rivals, maintain stability, and then attack the apex with extreme aggression. That style was what made him so dominant with Yamaha in Superbike. But when he moved to MotoGP, that style seemed to disappear. The previous version of the Yamaha MotoGP bike was too stiff for TOPRAK's natural character. He couldn't clearly feel the limits of front grip. As a result, every time he tried to brake aggressively, the bike felt like it was fighting against itself. The onboard camera repeatedly showed TOPRAK having to make small corrections mid-corner because the bike wouldn't follow his desired direction. But today at Le Mans, things began to change. From the first laps of practice, the Yamaha looked much more stable under braking. TOPRAK is starting to be able to achieve higher corner entry speeds without losing front-end control. Even in some technical sections that were previously his weak points, he now seems much more comfortable changing direction. The change in the front strut position is a major factor. With a more upright front angle, the bike's weight distribution is more balanced. The Yamaha's front end now responds more clearly to TOPRAK when entering corners. This is crucial because the Turkish rider always relies on his instincts with the front of the bike to determine braking points. Meanwhile, the decision to move the rear wheel back forward has had a significant impact on the bike's agility. The wheelbase is slightly shorter, making it easier to turn in the slow sections of Le Mans. Yamaha had used a relatively long bike configuration in previous tests to maintain stability and traction. However, this setup actually made it difficult for TOPRAK to make quick changes of direction. The bike now looks much more lively. What caught the paddock's attention most was the change in the swing arm angle. Yamaha has finally moved away from the overly flat swing arm, which was previously considered safe for maintaining rear tire traction. The problem was that setup made the bike feel too soft and less aggressive when opening the throttle out of corners. Today, TOPRAK started to get a different feeling. With a slightly higher swing arm angle, the mechanical grip of the rear tire felt stronger when accelerating. The bike no longer seemed so passive exiting corners. TOPRAK was able to open the throttle earlier, without having to wait for the bike to fully upright. The change was immediately apparent in the rider's body language. In previous sessions, TOPRAK had often looked frustrated on the bike. His body movements were stiff, he made frequent corrections, and at times appeared to be fighting the Yamaha's character. But today, his movements were much more natural. His shoulders looked more relaxed, the bike was more stable, and his lap-to-lap rhythm was starting to become consistent. Some paddock analysts even called today's practice session one of TOPRAK's most promising performances since his first ride on a Yamaha MotoGP bike. Although his lap times weren't yet completely dominant, many rival engineers were beginning to notice the changes. Yamaha. Because in modern MotoGP, the real danger sign isn't just the fastest lap, but when a rider begins to gain confidence in their bike. And that's what TOPRAK is now starting to see. Yamaha itself seems to be starting to understand one important thing. They've been too focused on building a stable and technically safe bike, but they've forgotten that TOPRAK needs a bike that gives him the freedom to attack. He's not the type of rider who relies on complete stability like some other riders. He needs a bike that can react quickly to his aggressive inputs.